All right, so it's a lovely November day. It's November 10th, Sunday. It's like 60 degrees out. Beautiful day. It's probably one of the last beautiful days we're going to have for a while. I'm out here at the farm. I got to move some stuff around and prep for winter, get the winter projects ready and stuff for next year. I'm starting to plan for next year what I want to do. We're going to do corn. You can see the beans are off here at the farm by the barn. They're off down the road. The combine's in the barn. It's a beautiful little story. You know, that's how everybody thinks it should go. It's a beautiful day. Everything's done. But let's talk about how we got to here, how the beans are off. So I used the Massey Ferguson in this field, and there's some beans on the ground. Not too many, believe it or not. It was all from the head. The reel was shattering them because it spins too fast. I don't have the right pulleys to slow it down a little bit, but we may look into getting some of them if I can find a corn head for that combine. If I cannot find a corn head for that combine, I'll be selling it. And that's part of what I'm planning for next year, is to figure out how wide I want to plant my corn rows, because it depends on if I can find a corn head or not. The corn heads I can get for the Massey Ferguson combine are a 2-row wide 36-inch row corn head. You can get a 3-row narrow for it, but I don't know if I want to even try to force that much corn through that combine. The manual says it'll handle that, but that was back in the late 60s, early 70s, when corn was like 100 bushels the acre, not pushing 200. And I have a 4-row narrow for the gleaners, and I have all these gleaner parts here. I don't have any Massey Ferguson parts, so I'm leaning towards getting a gleaner, selling that Massey Ferguson off, and getting a good gleaner F or an F2, something about that size. I have these F2 parts, and F parts aren't really the same, so I'll really be pushing to probably get a nice F. I'd like to get a diesel F. They're out there, but a gas one works too. I just want a good combine. Looking for corn planters. I don't know if I want to use this corn planter or not. I'm wanting to do some more no-till and cover crops and stuff like that. Get into that. And this is a 494A. It's set up for wide rows, but I can narrow it down to 30-inch rows. If you buy a 7000 John Deere, they're either or. They're either wide row or they're narrow row. You got to do a lot of work to do one or the other, unless you get a conservation till model, I believe. Then them ones will swap over easier. And I'd like to be able to plant beans in 15-inch rows. And if I can't do that, I would get, for the following year, I'd have to look into a no-till drill, because I'd like to do a rotation with oats in it, because I can use oats for feed. And I would like to grow rye for a cover crop. I could no-till the rye after the beans. And I would like to, after corn, when this goes back into soybeans, plant just this field to rye and harvest it, so I have seed for cover crop after soybeans, is my plan there. But let's talk a little bit about harvest. I don't have any videos because it was dark the whole time I was taking grain off. I got soybeans all over the floor here. I think I have videos working on this. I don't remember, because it's been over the course of a month-ish time frame, and I don't remember if I kept the videos or not. I made some update videos, but they got outdated, and I ended up deleting them with the combine. But it's in here, and it's in here without the header. If I was storing it, it would have the header on it, but it's in here without the header because I got to do some work to it. I didn't take off that whole field down there, the 10-acre field, with this combine. I don't think I did that. I ended up plugging this combine up. That's why the cylinder cover's off. I got about 70 bushels in my gravity wagon, and I ended up plugging this combine up, and the engagement pulley, idler pulley right there, that belt's supposed to be under it. Well, it was dragging. It didn't disengage all the way, and it ended up burning that flat belt up. You can't see it from here or there, but it's pretty thin on the top and just about ripped. And I couldn't get this thing unplugged in the field. I got the concaves backed out as far as they'll go. I was pretty much running them wide open anyways, because if you look here, you see how all them soybeans are split? So the soybeans are cracking. So I was trying to run it wide open, and I thought it was the machine causing the soybeans to crack. Here's more that are hull-less and split. I thought it was the machine. Turns out it wasn't the machine. It's just the soybeans were getting off that late. They got planted really early, taken off late. So it was the soybeans, because I had the guy that farms the rented piece back here take them off for me, and his machine split them just as bad as this one did. He's got a Gleaner F2. But when I first started combining, I combined this field over here, it didn't split any. This field was planted 3 weeks later than the field down the road. But to change the cylinder speed, you got to change out sprockets. This sprocket here and this sprocket behind this pulley. Most newer machines are a variable speed system for the cylinder speed. They'll have two big variable speed pulleys here and a belt, and sometimes you have to change the sprocket still, but not two sprockets, just one, and then you have an infinite amount of RPMs. Here you have just a few set RPMs. Well, when I ran this machine, I did a little test run. The beans were coming out clean. It wasn't splitting any. I was like, great, I got her set up right. It's ready to go. Went to the next field. I mean, it was splitting like every soybean. I'm like, this ain't right. So I got to looking, and this is a 31 tooth sprocket. That was here. There was a 23 tooth sprocket here. That puts it at 1100 and some change in RPMs. Recommended for soybeans is 300 to 700 RPMs. So I'm like almost double what I should be, or more than double, depending on which RPM you want. So if you flip-flop the two sprockets, you put the 31 down here and the 23 up here, that gets you down to 532 RPMs within range. So I was running, and it wasn't splitting as many, but it was still splitting them. So I'm like, man, this is not good. I opened the concave all the way, closed it, you know, I was trying everything, still splitting them. So I ended up, you know, I was about ready to admit defeat. I'm like, I'm going to have somebody else take these off for me, but there's a little toolbox right here. And I found another 31 tooth sprocket in there. I'm like, well, that don't do me no good. So I quit for that night, and, you know, I'm going over my options, and I come back and the next day, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll adjust the concave more, because you can adjust the rear concave independent from the front. So I'm like, well, I'll set that out a little bit more. That could be part of the problem, which it was part of the problem, not the solution to the problem, because speed cracks beans more so than clearance does. So I'm like, man, I really need a 19 tooth sprocket. There's only a few sprockets you can get for these. I'm like, I really need a 19 tooth sprocket. So I'm like, well, maybe I just missed it in that toolbox, because there's a bunch of bean chaff in there. So I'm digging around, I'm not feeling it. And I reach up, and you see how this toolbox is slanted forward, where there's a shaft that runs across there. It's in a tube. Well, in front of that tube, there's a little nook and cranny. There was my 19 tooth sprocket. So you put the 19 tooth on, this is the drive, the beater shaft they call it, it comes from the big pulley on the other side that's got the flat belt on it, and then this is for the cylinder. You put the 19 tooth on the beater shaft, the 31 tooth on here, that takes you down to 432 RPM. It's exactly 100 RPM different. So I did that, and I took it down there, and I was running. It wasn't cracking as many. Still cracking. Come to find out, it was the bean's fault, not the combine's fault. And so I take that sucker all the way out, and it's really, being that low RPM, it's really grinding through the bean stalks, and it's just, it sounds like crap. I was running it, you know, I was like, well, it's still cracking them. I was going to try to let the moisture come up in them a little bit, and that would probably been a bad idea, because I think they're this way from being wet, drying out, being wet, drying out. So I was like, well, I might as well finish filling my wagon up. So I went out there Thursday night and got 10 foot in, and I sucked in a big glob of weeds, and it brought the engine RPMs down. So I pushed the clutch in real quick, idled back up, went ahead, it sucked in some ragweed, and it stalled it. I'm like, oh, that's not good. So I'm down here, I'm pulling on stuff and trying to reverse everything to feed it out, and it just wasn't happening. And I ended up burning that belt up. So I sat down and called the guy that combines here, and he gave me a price. I said, go ahead and do it. And he's going to haul them into the elevator for me, and we'll see if we can break even. Looking by his truck was 3/4 full. He said it holds 300 bushels, so I'm guessing anywhere between 200 and 250 bushels of beans, but there's going to be dockage, I'm sure, because of the split and cracked beans. Honestly, if the elevator will even take them. I'm hoping they will. I don't see why they wouldn't. But it is what it is. So it's in the barn because I need to unplug it, for one. Two, I got to take the feeder house off to replace the bearing in that shaft, and I got to take the feeder house off to unplug it. So that's the only way I can see to unplug it. I want to try to get some new rasp bars for it. That could be part of the problem of it not of it cracking soybeans. They could be wore out pretty bad. Read that, but they say if you can put a number 2 pencil in here and they stick up, the pencil sticks up above these, they're wore out. A couple of them are bent, and it's going to be a good time to go through it if I want to use it for next year. Actually, there's 2 in a row bent right there. Are all 3 of them? Are they all bent? That one kind of looks bent too. See, somebody ran a rock through it. The feeder house, a lot of these are bent. The chains, I think, need tightened. So we're going to go through it. Yeah, just about every one of them are bent. Them you can probably make. That's probably just regular steel. That chain's all. Yeah, we're going to go through it though. I did do some work to it. And I think I have videos on it. But you guys seen I had to replace the bearing on this side. I replaced the bearing on the other side of that auger. I got the fuel tank cleaned out. It does have a new starter on it. When I was in here working on it, the starter gave up the ghost, wouldn't turn it over no more. Here was the other bearing I replaced, and I had to get a new shaft made for it, for this piece. It actually came with an extra one of these. The bearing, well, the shaft had spun inside the bearings, so it was wore out. It's got a new shaft, 2 new bearings. The extra one, which is actually laying over here on the floor, is in better shape, but the bearing, or the shaft on this side, the big pulley is wore out in that bearing. So I'm like, well, I might as well fix it. And I actually had the shaft made at a machine shop, here, a local machine shop, for $32. They made that. And then I had a couple dollars in the bearing, so probably for less than $50, because the bearings weren't that expensive. Less than $50, I got a new shaft on that and new bearing. But as far as I could tell running it, it does have an antifreeze leak somewhere. I I don't know where. I don't believe it's coming from the radiator because it's dripping down the machine, and we'll have to address that. But we'll either get it prettied up to sell or prettied up to use. I'm gonna put some new belts on it. The fan belts on this side for the separator fan, chaff fan, whatever you want to call it, they're pretty well shot, and the adjustment's all out of whack. I couldn't get this blowing as fast as I wanted it because it actually loosens one belt up as it tightens the other, and it's just a mess. And we got to get this new belt. You can see this belt's all crappy. So that's what's going to happen to this, and that's why this is in here. I actually did find another one of these for sale in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. It's got a corn head and a bean head. It looks in really good shape. It's got a different style cab than this one, but I don't know as if I want to get another Massey Ferguson. I'm not thrilled with it. It's not exactly what I'm looking for. I would prefer the variable speed cylinder, and it's not very ergonomic. It's kind of a pain. It takes me back to the John Deeres that I ran with the school. That you're looking way over the steering wheel, and the steering wheel's not adjustable. It's right in your gut because the header, you're looking right here, and if you look up there, down, this is in the way, and you're leaning forward. And it's just I like the Gleaners a lot better. So we'll see. I still haven't figured out my unload auger situation. I used a strap. It worked good. But anyways, we're just kind of rambling on. I got the barn cleaned up and organized a little bit different than what it used to be. If you remember, that truck used to be here. This is here because I can drive it out that way if I need it. And the 4010's tucked in that corner because I can get it out easier than that tractor, and I need that tractor to take the feeder house off because my excavator's gone. It's on a job with my uncle. So the grain cart sat here. I got these rabbit cages in here just because they're harder to move, and that grain cart, if I do put it in here, can be moved around. I do have permission to store it and this combine at a friend's house, and but if I get this truck out of here, fixed and out of here, I won't have to do that. I can put the combine here with the head on it because it's only 10 foot wide. Actually, it's like 12 foot wide, 11 and a half. It fits through that door barely. And then I can put the grain cart over here, or the tractor's here and the grain cart here, whatever. But I do have things cleaned up a little bit. I got everything I want inside. For the most part, I would like to eventually have a hay baler in here, but it's been outside, and I guess it can stay outside a little bit longer. So I'll get back with you guys when I get the results from the elevator about what my fields yielded, and we'll talk in a different video about what my plan is for next year. I'm looking at buying different equipment and doing some pretty cool stuff next year as far as that goes. So anyways, I got to get to work doing something out here, and catch you guys on the next one.